Hello there, Internet. This is VR Mousy D15B. This is an LX transmission, manual transmission for a D series Honda. And I'm going to go ahead and try and tear this thing apart. This is the same transmission that got the LSD installed on it. And I've since moved on and upgraded to a LX, or rather a VX transmission. The VX transmission runs lower highway RPMs at the same setup. Alright, so first things first, when you take this transmission apart, you've got these 12mm bolts. If I'm not mistaken, there's 13 of them. They go all the way around and they tie the case together. So looking at the case, you're going to need to take and remove all of these bolts going all the way around. Okay? This here is the front of your transmission. I'm sorry, this here is the top of your transmission. Here's your starter opening. Here's your vehicle speed sensor right here. Alright? Couple things that you're going to need to take out before you get going on this is you see this bolt here? And this bolt here has like a little springy dingy on it. That spring holds these little steel balls. There's 3 bolts, 3 springs, and 3 steel balls. Okay, now watch this. This is a different size thread and a different size bolt than this one. This one on the left is the one that holds the case together. The one on the right is the one that has that spring, and you see it has a recess that holds that spring. It's a whole different thread, a whole different size. What that is and what that does is that spring actually goes onto the arm of the shift fork, and there are divots in that arm. The spring holds that ball bearing to kind of give you your click and your rest in between so you know where you're at. So you got 1 here, okay, 2 and 3, if I'm not mistaken. Alright, those 3, take them out first. Take them out one at a time. Be ready to catch the ball. It's not going to come flying, but be ready for it. Okay, another thing that you're going to have to take off the transmission before you get started, and let's orient it this way for right now, because this is how you're going to look at it. As right now I am, this way is your firewall, that way is your front bumper. Motor's on that side. Alright, so here's your 1 spring pin, here's your 2 spring pin, and here's your 3 spring pin. Alright, the other thing that you need to get out, this is your reverse switch. See here? And that guy goes right in here. When you put this transmission into reverse, it actually lifts up a gear internal that makes to where you spin the opposite direction at your drive wheels. And when that gear comes up, there's an arm that pushes on this guy, and it closes the switch to tell your car wiring to turn on your reverse lights. Okay, so we take that out. So we've got the reverse out, we've got our 3 springs out, and then there's this cap here on the end. This cap here on the end, you can take him out with a 3/8 socket, and you just stick your socket directly in there. See, it has a 3/8 opening. Stick your socket directly in there, spin him loose. That comes out. Okay, one more piece that you want to take out before you start opening this case is this bolt here. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's an 8mm. Look at this pin on the back side. Okay, you get at this guy from the bell housing end of the transmission. So, on the bell housing end of the transmission, here, see this hole? That's where that bolt comes from. Okay, you take this bolt out before you start. Alright, this titty, for lack of a better explanation, actually is a guide. That there's a slide on the other side of that that keeps you in line when you're going through your gears. You'll see more when we open it up, but that's what this is. It's a big deal when you put it back together. When you're taking it apart right now, it's not a big deal. Okay, so we've got all of that. Seals are off. This guide is out. All of our bolts that hold the case together are out. The 3 springs and the 3 ball bearings are out. And this cap, which covers the output shaft, is out. Okay, now that we've got all our bolts out, it really doesn't matter. This is your drain. This is your fill. Okay, the transmission has been drained. I mean, if you can see, I've got a little bit of grease coming out of it from flipping it around and whatnot, but you don't need these open right now. I don't like them open when I do this. That's just me. Okay, next thing is, if you spin the case around and you look at it, there are a couple of spots, like right in here, that you can actually get a pry bar in it. Now look at, you see how I do and it stops? It doesn't want to go anymore. Don't force it. You need a pair of snap ring pliers that can open. These are reversible, cheapo Harbor Freights, okay? But when you look inside here, there's a snap ring that holds that bearing. The top bearing has a ring on it specifically for this snap ring. When you put it all together, again, it's important that you line it up, you're careful about it, and when you set that thing down, you should be able to get it to click. Oftentimes, it doesn't click when you put it back together, and what I do is I'll take a little pry bar, like this little baby, and I kind of reach in here, and you can pull up on that bearing to get it to sit into that snap ring and click. You need to get that click before you put this thing back together and you get on the road. But that's putting it back together. Alright, so I'm going to open my snap ring. Okay, and did you hear that click? That's the actual bearing assembly that output shaft settled, because I took it out of that lock on that snap ring. Now that it's open, we should be able to get this case to come apart without too big of a fight. There it is. So, here's your insides. One thing that you need to remember, take this guy rests in here. Alright? And it has an oil passage. That oil passage also, this guy guides the oil because there's no pump. This is a manual transmission. The fluid literally sloshes around inside there when you're driving. Okay, this guy will come right out. He's a guide. Clean it, put it back when you're done. Don't forget to put that thing back in. Okay, then you've got, there's a snap ring that holds this plastic in, just the same as the snap ring that held. You see this ridge right on here? I don't know if you can see because I got the camera up and hanging, but there's a ridge here that this snap ring is going to hold onto that ridge. Okay, so now the case is open and we're ready to start taking more stuff apart. This is your reverse. When you put it in reverse, it pulls up this gear, okay? And that, I'm a little lost looking at it right now because I'm trying to talk and explain as I go, but that makes this reverse sensor, okay? So there you have that much. You get a 10 millimeter, and we're going to pop this reverse all out, okay? So these two bolts are what holds your reverse setup together. Now this transmission is a bit dirty inside. I'll have you know, I abused the piss out of this transmission. This transmission, no joke, I was dumping the clutch out of this thing from $7 grand just to see, because I wanted to see smoke coming out of both of my tires because I put that LSD block on it. And boy, it sure did. It was a good time. I wouldn't recommend you do that to a car you want to normally go out and drive and take care of. You know, like if it's your daily driver, that's not your first choice of what to do. Okay, so here's our reverse setup. And that, when you go into reverse, this guy will pick up that gear, and that gear engages here, and that'll change your direction so that you're actually going to spin reverse. Okay, so we're going to take all our reverse stuff. I'm going to set it off to the side here. Everything needs to be cleaned. Everything needs to be gone through. Here's your magnet. I'm sure that my magnet is, look at that. Look at all these filings. I abused the hell out of this transmission. Like I said, it's had, I think I only put about 12,000 miles on it. It's totally beat. Let's come around this way. Next thing before you can get this assembly out is the actual shift linkage inside here. It's right next to your pinion. That comes from here where you shift. Your shifter ties on here. Okay, that goes through internal and it moves this guy. This guy is on a bar that runs through the case. Spring loaded. That bar is on this bolt here. Okay, so that it pivots, and that pivot moves your shift forks up and down to engage different gears. Okay, as you're shifting. So what we need to do is we need to get this guy in a position, one, that we can get at this bolt. Okay, now this bar that runs through, the one that pushes you up and down, and it also comes in and out, is the one that is guided on the backside by this bolt. Remember this one with the titty on it? That goes in through the bell housing side? Alright. I need a 12 millimeter to open that guy. Right here. Once we get this 12 millimeter out, then that releases that center arm. And when I say it releases the center arm, what I mean is that it's locked in place on this pin, and it's locked in place so that this pin and this arm, as it pivots, will drive a little pin that moves your shift forks. Okay, and so you have to release that pin that drives your shift forks to get your shifter assembly, your whole gears and your input and output shafts out. Once that's loose, it shouldn't be too darn hard, except when you're trying to show and say how to do it, to get the whole thing apart. Very gently. We should now be able to guide this guy, but I'm not lined up. There it is. There it is. Wow, this thing really is not happy after all the abuse I gave it. Yeah, she's sticking. Generally, it would just lift right up and out of here. Because it is clear here. Everything is passed. You know what it might just be? It might be that I'm in between gears. shift forks. So now I'm going to have to go through this. I'm going to look at all the teeth on the gears themselves, the meshing and the mating surfaces, make sure that they're not wasted. I'm going to end up replacing bearings just because it's been open. I don't want to put it back together, excuse me, without new bearings. I'm going to have to go through the synchros and make sure I haven't destroyed them. Look at all the teeth, everything else. And so here's the final drive. And this is the pinion that has the LSD block in it. Here you see my LSD block. Hopefully you can see it from there. So I'm going to open him up. I'm going to see what it looks like and whether or not it's entirely gone. I'll probably end up putting a new one in there. But for what it's worth, I was expecting this thing to look a whole lot worse. So now it's going to be time to tear in here and see how big of a mess did I actually make for myself. Okay, these guys go on the input shaft here. Alright, got a set of needle bearings in here. Another deal, just like I showed you on that top half of that case, to guide oil through here. Okay, this guy is that linkage that drives your shifting up and down. Comes from back here. I don't know if you can see. There you go. So this way, like your front to back, where you're going to go to 1, 3, 5, and then you'll be 2, 4, and reverse back this way. Okay, and then when you twist that, see how the twist moves this guy up and down? That puts you into the range on these arms for the shift forks. And so now it's time to clean up my mess. But I wanted to share the teardown and what it takes to get at the final drive, the actual pinion, to where you put your LSD. So that's where the LSD goes, and that's what it takes to get at the pinion if you wanted to install an LSD on your D-Series Honda. Thanks for watching. Again, VR Mousy. Enjoy.